Michael Brunner.
You, on behalf of yourself as an heir, might want to challenge Michael Channel's claim or Mr. Roberts' claim. There are one or more other possible relatives that could potentially come in also and make a claim.
I never met Michael Brunner. What I knew about Michael Brunner was that his mom was Mary Brunner, and his father was my grandfather, Charles Manson Sr.
It was 1967 and the summer of love when Mary Brunner and Charlie Manson had their own summer of love, and Mary got pregnant. He was the first child of the first family member with Charles Manson.
Charles certainly believed that Michael was his child. He referred to him, he didn't refer to him as Michael. He referred to him as Sunstone, S-O-N-S-T-O-N-E, Sunstone. She was the first woman in the Manson family and was instrumental in helping Charlie, I think, recruit other young women. And Charles certainly believed that Michael was his child. He was never denied paternity. We had a strong factual case because Mike was a natural child. We had a birth certificate showing Charlie as his father. He had grown up in the home. The only child really that can say they grew up with Charlie in the family until Charlie's arrest and subsequent sentencing to death. Mike eventually went to live with his grandparents, and they felt it would be best for him to have a legal mother and father and maybe wipe away the stain of having Charles Manson as his father. And as a result, he was adopted by them and raised by them.
We didn't see Michael Brunner in the picture whatsoever. He never made contact with me whatsoever before my grandfather passed. I thought my father, Jay White, might have been the only son Charles Manson had.
So at this point in time, based on what we've heard from the coroner, we are going to move forward to get a process ready so that if we're successful on your behalf and the remains are to go to you, that your wishes will be carried out and be ready to be carried out right away. If that doesn't happen and it doesn't go the direction that you want it to go, we'll have to see what the basis is of that decision and decide whether we're going to take any action regarding that. So we'll be in touch with you in the coming days. The county council up in Kern County did a very good job of exploring the issues and the possible claimants. And they put together a list that we ended up following in whatever we did. So they identified the players. There were Matthew Lentz, Michael Channels with the will, and Michael Brunner, who actually became very active in that proceeding. Matthew Lentz filed paperwork in the Los Angeles County proceeding, and he had a number of notes that indicated that there were things he needed to do in order to fix his petition. He never fixed his petition. The court gave him the opportunity to fix his petition a number of times, and ultimately at one of the hearings said, I want you to give notice to Mr. Lentz that if he doesn't fix it by the next hearing, his petition will be denied. And that's what occurred. We also had Michael Channel's purported will, which said, I give you everything, and that was pretty much it.
I don't think my grandfather would have wrote a will that would give entirely everything that he's ever produced over to a guy that was only a pen pal. I knew a lot of people were selling things out on the internet. You know, in my view, from coming to understand Michael Channels, that was exactly what was going to happen. They were going to sell as much as they could until they run out of my grandfather. Michael Channels talked about, you know, cutting tattoos off his body. I mean, I could see that happening. I took it personal.
Murderabilia is a business where people befriend murderers, many of whom are on death row but are in prison, and try to get items from them, because there is a cult following of people who are fascinated with murders and murderers and anything associated with them, and pay money to get the items. So they were murderabilia dealers.
All this stuff kind of found me. I've been collecting for years. I started seeking it out and writing people and getting things. After a while, people realize that you collect this kind of thing, and it just starts finding you. It's bizarre.
I had to explore the murderabilia scene so I could see what it was about. I went to visit a gentleman who was interested in doing a blood painting of my grandfather. This is a pretty nice setup.
Thank you, thank you.
It's like every wall there's something new, so.
I'm a big fan of the weird, strange, unusual, infamous, and anything that turns an eye.
So you got some of my grandfather's stuff up here also.
I do. The stuff I have of your grandfather, Charles Manson, that's just a small taste of it. So I have some paintings and all kinds of crazy stuff. There's so much Charles Manson stuff out there. I mean,
oh my.
Your grandfather made an impact. He was a complex guy, he was a showman. That's what I liked about him. I mean, I initially got a hold of him because of the infamy, and after talking to him, I saw a little deeper into the whole thing. I would absolutely be honored if Jason would contribute to this. The reason being is it means a lot to me to have the grandson of Charles Manson contribute his blood to these paintings, because the DNA is in there. I actually did my first blood painting of Charles Manson a couple of years ago and sent him copies of it. I like to paint in it, and the idea is to create a future relic. I'm not really a dealer. I'll trade once in a while. Once in a great while I might sell something, but I'm a collector. I don't know, I just have a compulsion to have the stuff around me. It's not all, serial killers that I paint. I paint anything I find fascinating.
I just think that, you have a choice at a certain point whether to sort of embrace the dark side, and it doesn't get much darker than Charlie Manson in terms of the bad vibe, the dark karma that he's gonna generate. And to say, yeah, I want some of that shit. It's like someone who embraces heroin.
I don't know if I do agree with that. I think it's all exploitation. And I'm exploiting things that I'm fascinated with. And if other people happen to be, that's great, because I'm glad if people enjoy or get pissed off by my art. I don't mind provoking.
After Dad left, I had to go back up and get a book. His girlfriend grabbed my arm and she started looking at me, and she's like, oh, I wish I could take your blood, and she's looking at my veins, and I'm just thinking, leave it alone. After seeing what was in there, it's not my cup of tea. You can't have my blood, my anything, man. I was out.
Really? Do your thing, whatever you want to do, but it's not going to be with anything from my husband or my family. I don't know. People do anything to make a buck.
Memorabilia collectors and ghoulish types from the world over are seeking to get a hold of the remains and dissect and sell, God knows, fingernails or whatever, teeth. You may not have been close, but I think that would make any of us recoil in some degree of horror. And I think it made Michael Brunner recoil in horror. His interest was in securing a dignified end to an undignified life. He felt in that regard that it was his duty to do something for his biological father.
As far as Michael Channel's will was concerned, the document that I saw had a lot of parts of it blacked out. It appeared to be a somewhat incoherent document, but from what I could make out it looked as though it was a document that Mr. Channels himself may have been a witness to. Under California law, 2 witnesses would have to sign and date and give their contact information on the will itself. In this case, it appeared that at least one of the witnesses was an interested party, and that creates that presumption that it's not a valid will.
I got news from my attorney, Dale, that it was only down to one person for the custody of my grandfather, and that was Michael Brunner.
We had a strong factual case because Mike was a natural child.
I think it's great that I have an uncle out there. I would love to meet him. I would love to meet him on, terms that aren't so rough, I don't even know Michael Brunner. I didn't know him. I didn't know him before this happened. I don't know him now, but the opportunities are still there for us to have a bond.
And I'm just gonna say it. I mean, towards the end, when I asked him about Brunner, do you think he's yours? And he said, man, who knows, man? We were all fucking back then. Everyone was fucking everyone. How the fuck am I supposed to know that's my kid? And then, but I'll tell you what, I raised him. I took him out of her. I threw him up in the air to take the fear out of him. I love that kid. And it became this legal battle that I never foresaw coming. I know Charlie didn't either.
My name is Jason Freeman, and I'm here to claim my grandfather.
When he made that claim and went out there and was in front of the courthouse, and it was that was business. I'm gonna finish out what I started.
Family comes first.
What kind of relationship did you have?
I just want to get to know my grandfather. And he tells me, I don't know how to be a grandfather. I don't know how to be a father. The only father I have, the only grandfathers I have are these prison guards. And I know that's all he understands. I know that's all he knows, because that's where he was at all of his life, even as a child. I personally wanted to gift my grandfather with a chance to understand his grandson and his great-grandkids before he passed, and I did that for him.
This is life. This is the end of the life of someone I loved. I've spent over 17 years getting to know somebody that I developed a relationship with that I didn't see coming. I didn't foresee the man behind that mask, bro. He was an incredible human being, and he very rarely let people see underneath that mask. Very few people.
Yeah.
And, and I will admit, he died, I'm gonna say, protecting you, because he didn't want to let you in, because he didn't want you or your family tainted. I noticed whenever your grandfather got close to love, or someone telling him, whenever I would tell him I loved him, he'd say, man, you gotta stop. No, you're making me feel like a schoolgirl, man. What are you, you love me?
Yeah.
He would push you away.
Yeah.
He would lash out at you.
He would degrade you in some way.
He would degrade you, humiliate you.
Yeah.
And I'm smart enough to know that that's a shield for him, And it wasn't until the end of his life that he began to repeat it. And that's how I knew that was the mask.
It's just such a drama scene with that guy. And I don't know, he just thrives on it. It's I don't know what his infatuation is with Charles Manson, but there's something not right, because there's more to life, and now he's dead, so now what? I don't know what is, I don't know.
I still haven't come to complete honest, terms with myself on full acceptance that he's a murderer and a serial killer. I had to get a reality check. I wanted to meet somebody who was part of the Manson family that lived at Spawn Ranch. Hey, man. I had to go to the core of it, and I needed to hear from one of the Manson family members, and that was Diane Lake. Yeah.
I never heard about you until, it was in the news.
Yeah, I was just curious what it was like spending time with my grandfather before and then after the murders.
I was there pretty much the whole time. He just had this, this way about him. For me, it's been 50 years. So yeah. Time softens, the memories. But,
it does,
there's good memories and there's bad memories.
Yep.
You know, and I think that part of the hold that he had on me and all the girls is that he had this uncanny way of making each one of us feel like we were his favorite. You know, we were the most loved. And maybe he was protecting me.
I still have that same question with me. You know, was he protecting me or was he pushing me away?
Well, he had this really, you know, uncanny ability to read people and kind of, and it was probably a blessing and a curse, but he had this ability to read people and determine what their weaknesses were and what they needed, and he could provide it or make you feel like he was providing that love or that security or that, you know, made you feel worthy and special. And he had, you know, you know, I was disciplined, you know, when I acted out or, you know, when I didn't, you know, keep my focus on him. I got hit, you know, I got whipped, you know, a few times.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions in my own mind. If he's innocent, if he's guilty, what he's guilty of, where's the truth lay at? Because I know it doesn't lay at the courthouse. I don't believe that.
Right. But I think that he was definitely instrumental in creating this maelstrom, you know, that happened. I think it was his delusion. I think that and he got other people to believe in it.
To feed into that same illusion?
Yeah, illusion, delusion. He was the one that promoted this idea about this black-white race war that was going to happen, and that he was the instigator for preparing it, but other people were climbing on board.
He wanted these murders to be blamed on blacks so that whites would start indiscriminately killing blacks, but Manson felt that the blacks would end up killing all the whites except for Manson and the family. And innocent people were murdered for the reason that Manson and the family wanted to start a race war. I mean, that's about the basest motive that you could possibly dream up.
These people really embraced and enfolded his delusion. And that was about helter-skelter was real, and that at some point it was their responsibility to start it because it, you know, it wasn't happening.
The spring of 1969, Manson was getting frustrated because he thought that the blacks were going to start the revolution. And he said in May, the only thing that Blackie knows is what Whitey shows him, so someone's going to have to show Blackie how to do it. And then in June, he said, we're going to have to show Blackie how to do it. And on Friday, August 8th, Manson had been up at Big Sur, and he came back, and he said, now is the time for helter skelter. Well, now was the time for murder and bloodshed to begin.
And I had this epiphany a couple of months ago that kind of, because one of my big questions has always been, how could these people that I loved and, you know, was close to, how could they have actually, you know, killed people, right? I mean, physically, you know, where the rubber meets the road, how could they do that?
Sharon Tate had some friends over for lunch, and there was talk of having a party at the house that night, but she decided she wanted to have a quiet night with her friends. So she and Jay Sebring, Wojtek Frykowski, and Abigail Folger went to have dinner at a nearby Mexican restaurant. Then they came back for the night right around 10 o'clock.
The three women approached the house. Watson told Kasabian to look around the house to find out if there were any open doors or windows. She did that, didn't find anything, but when she came back, she saw Watson at a dining room window, and he had cut the screen and opened the window and climbed in. When they got to the living room, Jay Sebring, who was a longtime friend of Sharon's, Watson was having Sharon sit on the floor, and Sebring said, no, she's 8.5 months pregnant, let her sit on the sofa. And Watson, with his revolver, with the gun butt, smashed Sebring in the face, shot him and stabbed him. That basically killed Sebring.
I mean, it's one thing in your head to talk about, you know, are you willing to die for me? Are you willing to kill for me? Are you willing to kill, you know, in order to not be killed? Yes, exactly.
Krenwinkel chased Abigail Folger out of the back of the house, and fortunately, on the way, left her fingerprint inside next to the back door. And she chased Folger with an upraised knife and caught her in the front yard and proceeded to stab her. Wojciech Frykowski tried to run out of the front of the house. Adkins stabbed him in the leg a number of times, and he got out, and Watson tackled him in the front yard and stabbed him and shot him. Frykowski ended up being stabbed 51 times and hit over the head with the gun butt 13 times, so hard that the grip on the gun butt broke. And when Watson was finished with Frykowski, he went over and helped polish off Abigail Folger.
But to me, it was a mind game. It's like, no, he didn't really want us to kill. We had to be, I mean, it's really hard to explain, but we had to be willing to kill in order to not have to or to not be killed ourselves. That was, because he was always playing mind games.
Watson, with this rope he brought, he knew that there were beams going across the living room ceiling, and he threw the rope over the ceiling beam and tied one end around Jay Sebring's neck, Jay, who was already dead, and the other around Sharon Tate's neck. And the coroner said that when Watson hung her from the beam, that she was still alive.
Charles Manson, your grandfather, descended into a psychotic, I think, delusion that made him increasingly, and his name, Manson, increasingly made him feel like he was Christ, you know, and the second coming, and that he had a mission.
He told his family members that he was Jesus Christ, and he would recreate on the cross how it felt when they were driving the nails in his hands and in his feet. And he said the first time he came to earth, he came as Jesus Christ, and he got crucified. So this time he was coming as the devil.
He didn't have anybody saying, "No, you're wrong. You know, that's impossible.
Yeah.
You know, this isn't going to happen." And the struggle, and I'm sure it's been a huge struggle, as it was for me, and it still is, in revealing that. And fortunately, and I hope you have some of the same experience that I've had since I came out about my story, and that it's been 99.9% positive. People say, "Good for you, how brave, you know, to tell your story." And so we're so thankful. Now it helps us understand how this cult, how this man came to be, you know, the icon of evil.
Diane's story was like a three-piece combination that put me on the ground.
Yeah, I'm so glad to have met you. We shared our stories.
Yeah. She was pretty open with explaining to me that my grandfather was the mastermind behind all the murders. I turned to Dode Overton. He was a pastor from a local church in our area. When my dad passed away, he was there. Now my grandfather passed away, and I want to make sure he was there. I'm not looking at the forest, I'm looking at that one tree. And I know I need people around me that can see in front of me and on the side. And he always had the right answers at the right time.
When I first met Jason, he was, like you say, a rough character. After he was coming to the church for a while, I got to know him a little bit better. He was still fighting at that time. There are those things that happen in our lives that we can repent of and turn from and walk away from.
Hey, man.
How you doing? Which I believe Jason did that, and that's why he's living the life he is today. So how do you feel spiritually? How do you release that hatred and all that anger that's against you for something you didn't really do?
Well, the first thing I can say that for weeks and months, you know, it's been a roller coaster. You know, it's like, where do I put my time and my focus and my energy? We got some things out of the way, and we're in court now, and I feel. I mean, I know I could feel the spiritual battle going on. It's around me. It's not. It is within you also, but you still got to make that choice not to serve the devil. So I know there's times in this past year, you know, where I've reached out to you, you know, to say hi and just ask for some advice. But I don't know if you really, grasped, or if I even told you, you know, what I've been dealing with, you know, in this past year.
I imagine a lot.
Yeah.
You got it coming at you from all angles. He's not accountable for that. He's not accountable for anything his grandfather did. And I don't believe he has to make penance or anything like that. We can't pray him out of hell. We can't pay for them to get out of hell. That's just the fact of the scripture. There's a lot of people out there that I would imagine, just because I know what the world thinks, that this is all a big game, that you somehow manipulated this whole thing so that you can get rich. How do you deal with that?
Well, that's exactly what probably 60% of the world or society probably thinks. You know, we got to stay focused on God and just not drop the ball.
The world would say, and you just answered that the whole reason you're doing this is to put money in Jason Freeman's pocket.
Yes.
When we talked, I don't know, a couple weeks ago, I think we talked on the phone, and you said it was anything that you gained was for kingdom purpose.
Yeah. My focus in life is to give back. God's laid it on my heart that's my job.
When I was praying for you, I was getting this attack thing going on. I was concerned about you and your life and how you were dealing with that, because I know that's a lot of pressure.
It's different pressure than I've ever felt before, but I do know that God's been preparing me. Like, for instance, I've got a couple groups of people that just hammer down on me on the internet. And I can't sit there and say bad things about them. I don't even know them. If this is what they choose to do, that's still their choice. I choose to, turn the other cheek. I know there's times I do get frustrated. I mean, I fought all my life, you know. Now I understand it's a spiritual battle. It's not that physical battle. You know,
you're starting to get a hold of that scripture says we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers and rulers of the darkness of this world. That's your fight now.
It is. I see it.
You're out of the cage and you're in the big ring, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Well, I hope you win it.
One more thing for you tonight, and it is the resolution of the absurd fight over what to do with Charles Manson's remains.
In the course of the proceedings in Kern County, in open court, Michael Brunner's attorney acknowledged, when pressed by the court, that they did not have the original birth certificate identifying his client as being Charles Manson's son, because when you get adopted, you can't get the original birth certificate anymore. And that was the end of that part of the case.
The judge could have gone either way on that, and that's the thing. The judge has to make a decision. That was the one she made. We made our best case.
It became clear to the court that in what we call an exigent circumstance or an emergency circumstance, which is what to do with the body, that the court could clearly find that Jason was the next of kin and give him the remains.
I was at my boys' baseball game, and I got the phone call from a lady from CNN, and She says, so how's it feel to have one custody of Charles Manson? I was lost for words. I didn't know what to think. Already been going through this battle for months. And she was the first person to say, hey, you know, you won.
The notorious murderer died 4 months ago, and there were actually 4 different parties jockeying to get custody of his body. A California judge decided that the cult leader's remains will go to his grandson, who says that he plans a cremation. And here's the weird part. He also wants to invite the other people who were trying to claim that carcass because, quote, he wouldn't want them to miss out, end quote.
When it hit me like a ton of bricks. You're receiving Charles Manson's body. It's not just your grandfather. You're going to be taking on more than just your average funeral, cremation, spreading of the ashes.
Once this came to a point where there were choices, there were 3 choices, and he was the lesser of the 3 evils. Because the other 2 choices were not choices at all. They were totally based on lies and falsehood.
I think you look at Jason and you think, maybe, you know, your one inclination would be, well, yeah, he's out for publicity maybe, he's trying to make some money, and all those things would be possible. And being a newspaper reporter, I would have that skepticism naturally. But I do think that there was a genuine connection as it related to family, and not in the Manson family sense, but in the family sense.
I can see how this is torturing Jason. And I see the public attacks on him. And this dark hole that you get sucked into, it's like a rabbit hole that once you go down, you get so lost you can barely find your way back. And I feel responsible for that in a way.
There's a lot of people that are mad out there. They're frustrated. They don't know where you come from. It looks like you just come out of the woodwork and you're out to bank on your grandfather's estate, his name, and everything that comes with Charles Manson. Once I got the body, everybody started calling me, even the media. I got this local reporter. He threw my name in an article and he stuck my address in there.
Oh, that's.
And then I got people. I mean, I don't know. I got people driving by my house and they're looking at me. And some people are waving. I'm like, I don't know you.
Right.
You know. So I got a security system now in my house. I got a bigger dog.
You know, it's his choice. It's, you know, it's something that he feels that he needs to settle in his life, and I'm all for it. You know, who knows? Who's saying I wouldn't be the same way if it was my situation? You know.
You just need to stay focused where you want to be with it, and
yeah,
that's where it's going to end up in the end anyway.
Yeah.
Stay focused, keep your chin up, keep moving on life like you always have, you know?
Yeah, well...
Ain't the first time you face stuff like this.
No, I haven't.
Think about it. Could you or anyone else imagine being Charles Manson's grandson, and how would the average person survive that? How would the average person get through life knowing that? You know, would they be strong or would they be weak? Would it tear them down and make them continue to do bad things? Or... You know, that's my family, so this is who I'm supposed to be. I'm not supposed to do good things, so who cares if I get in trouble? But he was really overcome that, and I just think that's why he embraces this.
I'm sure he's at great risk for associating himself with Charles Manson because people are people hold grudges, and of course you're at risk when you voice your opinion. So he's at risk that way. I believe that he's not afraid. He's never been a guy of fear.
So here I am. I've got Charles Manson's body. I've got my grandfather's body. Now I have to go to California with my wife, and I have to go through the process of claiming it. And everything was actually coming to a point now, so it was emotional, but I knew there was a lot of work ahead of me. And we just kept moving forward. You know, Dale, you and I both talked extensively on where the remains could end up. And that's the last thing I want to do is see my grandfather's ashes on eBay or things that he owned just being sold off.
That, and I think I've mentioned to you a number of times my concern that having his ashes in a place where they might be identified might actually put you or your family at risk. So I think that's a very big concern. So my major concern in that event is if it's known, in fact, that you have the ashes or people believe that you have the ashes, someone may actually be motivated to break into your house, might cause you or your family harm in order to steal those things from you. So my own personal suggestion would be, if it's in your intent to have him cremated, to scatter his ashes in a manner in which the public will know that they've been scattered, that they don't remain, and that it won't put you at risk. Yeah. And it will also bring some finality to the time on earth of your grandfather. Ultimately, there will be an inventory and appraisal where we identify whatever monetary assets he has, and I understand he may have more monetary assets than we might otherwise anticipate. But he also has, as I understand, an extensive collection of art that he himself has created that still should be stored at the prison.
Okay.
He also has intellectual property rights that relate to music. Likely his person in the media may be an intellectual property right that will be controlled by the estate and ultimately by the heirs. I noted that in the recent news, there was an art piece that was sold, I think, in Great Britain for $10 million that was purportedly inspired by Helter Skelter. So if there's actually an art piece by your grandfather, it might be in that range. We don't know. Now that he's passed, there won't be any future art pieces that he creates. So it's a limited collection of assets, and that may make them even more valuable.
I knew the first task was actually getting my grandfather from Kern County to the funeral home.
Jason had been in touch with my nephew, who owns a funeral home in Shafter, which is very near the facility that Charles Manson passed away in. So they were looking for a local funeral home, and my nephew just couldn't provide the type of facilities that Jason was asking for. So he recommended me, and Jason contacted me, and we got involved that way.
Well, it happened on a Thursday afternoon when I received a phone call from Les Peters, who is the owner of the Porterville Funeral Home, and that's not unusual because he'll call me when there's a need for a pastor. And he called me and said he had somewhat of an unusual situation and if I would be available to do a service. And so then he shared that it was for Charles Manson. I was living in Southern California when those atrocious events took place, and like so many others, in shock as I followed the news. And so, I mean, that was a part of my early years. And so, yeah, thinking about that terrible moment in history, and now the reality of this person having a funeral service. Then he shared that he was going to be meeting with Charles Manson's grandson, Jason. And as a part of the conversation, he said, and Jason's a believer, he's a Christian. And so a couple things went through my mind. I said, well, number one, I'm a pastor, so I'm always involved in doing services for whoever it may be. But then also to know I could be supporting someone who's of the faith, I wanted to be available for that.
Over the years, I've served many people who were in prison and did heinous crimes, and we never judged them. We're here for the families. When they request us, we just go ahead and service them. Well, it was a very long day. We went to pick him up at 8 o'clock, as early as the coroner's office opened, like we would normally do. And we had our releases in order. And so, silly me, I just thought it would be business as usual. But when I showed up at the coroner's office, I was told to sit out in the waiting room. And I waited there for quite a while. Someone came out and told me that, well, they didn't want to release him yet, and that we didn't have the proper releases. And so it was kind of a runaround for a while. And I'm not sure what was going on at the coroner's office, why they didn't want to treat it as they normally would, but I was trying to. Well, I was anticipating that the remains would be in the freezing area. And I've been into that coroner's office many times, and you turn right, you go to the refrigerator section, you turn left, you go to the area where they actually hold remains in frozen. And that's what I anticipated to do, and that's not what the case was. We are required by California law, and basically it's the federal law, that when we take remains into our care, that they be placed in a refrigerated area. And that's, of course, what happened to Mr. Manson. But that's not something you would do for 3 months, which is what happened here. And so that really created a lot of difficulties for me on the technical side of preparing his remains. The largest problem I had was that just like if you're in a bathtub, you all know what happens. You're in a bathtub for an extended period of time, your fingers start to wrinkle up from the water and everything. There were some fluids in the bottom of the bag that he was in, even though they had some type of an absorbent cloth. But that many months, that's what I was dealing with, to the point that it was just beyond repair. I'm always very careful when I talk to people about remains and the condition, and I don't want to be macabre. I always want to respect everyone's dignity. And I'm not sure I want to go too much into the condition of Mr. Manson's remains, just out of respect that I would have for anyone.
As soon as Les had given me a call, to be honest, I immediately went on the internet search for Jason Freeman to find out a little bit about his background. And it gave me a chance to read up a little bit on Jason and give me a little bit of his background. And that made all the difference in the world to me, because Jason's a believer. He's a Christian, and I felt like there was someone whom I truly could stand with and support.
Jason had already put in a considerable amount of time in trying to put together the facility to be able to handle the remains. When the time came, he was ready to proceed.
I was contacted Thursday by the funeral home with the understanding we would be meeting with the family members involved on Friday.
Once I made contact with Great Wolf and George, I knew that whoever they wanted to have there, I wanted to give them an open invitation to share that with the people that they know that I don't know, that knew my grandfather, so they all could have the opportunity to share this time together.
I have a feeling there's going to be a lot more that show up. Do we have a plan for security, or like we need to think about that, because you know that somehow somebody's going to know what's happening where. That's great. Not everybody that shows up is getting in. I mean, that's going to have to be very selective. So it's important to have security in place.
Yeah, I think security has to be a priority.
Jason has done all of the work. Jason and his family have been through the ringer with learning about Charlie, with learning about Jay, with going through all these emotions. There hasn't been one single one of these people who've contributed to anything. They're just another character that followed Charlie, and that's crazy.